Live from the church sanctuary, it's Northwoods tonight. How's everybody doing? Great! Bill, I didn't hear you. We'll do it again. We'll just do it again. No, I'm kidding. All right. Thank you again, as always, for all the food back there, for everyone who put effort into preparing those meals. Again, it is a huge part of what we do, and it wasn't even something we planned. It just kind of happened, and we've been doing it ever since, and it's just wonderful. So thank you again for that. And as always, look around the room. We've got a lot of people, a lot of families that aren't here tonight because apparently it's a beautiful weekend in the summer, and people are out. We live in a land filled with lakes and things. So, all right, we are still, AJ, still in the book of Romans. Still, I don't know, still part 47. Part 4. There's only 16 chapters in Romans, and we're on part 47. What are you doing, Brad? We're going to hit we're going to take a big chunk out of it tonight. We're going to do 3 more verses tonight, so we're moving right along. We're going to be in Romans chapter 14, verses 1 through 3. Gary polished off Romans 13 last week. I did a great job. It's got a ton of views, and it was just really good material. He did a great job. So before we hit our sermon tonight, we'll hit our word for the year, warrior. And again, as always, I'll read you the definition, and I want you to think about you, think about Jesus, and see if this makes any sense to you. One who is engaged aggressively or energetically in an activity, cause, or conflict. A person who fights in battles and is known for having courage and skill. A guardian specializing in warfare, someone who is strong and doesn't give up. And Gary talked about that one last week. And the last one on the list, one who is persistently prepared for battle and makes sacrifices to defend others. Warrior. So, in Romans 1 through 11, chapters 1 through 11, Paul talks about our relationship with God in the vertical. There's a lot going on in those first 11 chapters, but basically, if you distill it down, he's talking about the church's relationship with God, our relationship with him. It's a vertical relationship like this. In Romans chapters 12 through 16, where we are now, Paul talks about our relationship with each other in the church. He's talking to the church about the church and how we interact with each other in the church. And that is the horizontal relationship. And I just find that interesting because put them together and you get that. And it's kind of interesting too because Paul says in 1 Corinthians 2:2, he says this, he says, "For I resolved to know nothing while I was with you except Jesus Christ and him crucified." There's one thing of primary importance to Paul. One thing over everything else. One thing that puts everything else to rest. One thing worth talking about. One thing worth fighting over. One thing worth standing your ground on. And that is Jesus Christ and him crucified for you. So much other stuff, even Paul says, is trivial and insignificant. Stay on track. He talks about it in a lot of the stuff that he writes about running the race, staying in your lane, focusing on the target, all of these things, because so much will get us off track. The church in Rome is under persecution. When Paul is writing this, they're under persecution by the Roman Empire. Nero, really nice guy. You can read about him. But at the same time, even though the church is being persecuted, it's growing. It's kind of interesting how when, that old saying, when something's squeezed, like a lump of coal, when you squeeze it, turns into a diamond, right? So the church, under pressure, is actually growing and getting bigger and getting stronger because of that. And both Jews and non-Jews, otherwise known as the Gentiles, are coming into the church. There's rich people and poor people and powerful people and insignificant people and just all kinds of different cultures and backgrounds all coming together into the church at the same time. And you know what that means, right? Friction. It means disagreements. It means struggles within the church among each other, among the Christians in the church. So here in chapter 14, Paul addresses how we in here handle things when not everybody is getting their way. Probably never experienced that. That was sarcasm. And as we look at this tonight, I want you to notice Paul emphasizes, as we will walk through this in the next couple of weeks, he emphasizes the relationship with other people is more valuable. It is more important than the disagreement. It's more important than the issue that is causing the friction. People are more important than the problem. Romans 14, 1 through 3. Accept the one whose faith is weak, without quarreling over disputable matters. One person's faith allows them to eat anything, but another, whose faith is weak, eats only vegetables. And I mean, this is biblical proof against vegetarians. I'm just telling you up front. That's what that is, and I'm standing firm on that. No, I'm kidding. Verse 3, just thought I'd throw that out. The one who eats everything must not treat with contempt the one who does not. And the one who does not eat everything must not judge the one who does. For God has accepted them both. So, God's okay with Christians who approach their lives differently than you. Surprise. It's okay for a Christian in the church to, some of you like vanilla and some of you like chocolate ice cream. And then some of you like chocolate peanut butter ice cream. That's the best. We all know that. It's of God, right? It's okay. If they follow Jesus, but they only eat vegetables, but you follow Jesus and love steak on the grill, it's okay. It's okay. I mean, I was at a place at a church where the pastor didn't understand why I didn't just listen to Christian radio. And I said, well, some Christian radio is just not really that good, so I don't listen to it. I said, I don't like all the songs on Christian radio. I don't like all the songs on secular radio. But he couldn't understand why that was not the only thing I listened to. And it's like, well, I'm sorry. I came from a past that I was 30 when I got saved. So my whole life was not that stuff. So, and it's okay. It's okay to do different things and eat different things and listen to different things and like different things than other people in the church because you're different. And Paul says, stop fighting about those things. Why does it matter what you eat? It's irrelevant. God has accepted them. So should you. And again, I'm not talking about, don't misunderstand me. I'm not talking about accepting their sin and tolerating their sin. Oh, we've talked about that. That is not what we're hitting on tonight. I'm talking about people who are following Jesus in the church who just like different things than you. Your brothers and your sisters. Paul actually dares to address in these passages what he calls weak faith. Well, I don't know, Pastor Brad. That's kind of open for debate what that is. Weak faith. All faith is equal. Well, it's not. Surprise. It's not, or Paul wouldn't address it. Well, what do I mean? Let me help you with that a little bit tonight. What's weak faith versus strong faith? A weak faith, that's those who don't understand how to enjoy the fullness, the power, and the freedom that their salvation gives them. And a strong faith is those who do understand and can live in the fullness, the power, and the freedom of their salvation. Well, Pastor, I don't even know what that means. I'll try to explain it to you. On issues of morality and behavior, in Gary's sermon last week called Behave, kind of hit on that. The end of chapter 13, and it moves us right into this tonight. So on certain things, God draws a hard line in the sand. And he says, this is the line you shall not cross. And a strong person can live very easily inside that line. They can occupy all of the ground inside God's boundaries, even right up to the edge, even right up to the line, fully occupying all the territory God has given them. A weaker person can't do that. Paul says they have to stay a little bit distant from that line because it's too easy for them to step over it into places they shouldn't go. So they live a more restricted and a more limited life. Their temptations are stronger than their faith. And what you'll usually see in church is the people with a weaker faith are the ones with the strongest opinions. They want to restrict and control others with the same rules that they have to live by because they don't have the strength to live up to the line. And neither should you. The stronger personality, the stronger person, has more flexibility, they have more joy, they have more freedom, they have struggles with less temptation. The weaker person is more rigid, with less joy, less freedom, and they struggle more with temptation. And I want you to understand something tonight. I'm not picking on anybody. I'm not demeaning anybody. I'm not being self-righteous. I'm just trying to clarify a truth that Paul is addressing in Romans 14, because we as Christians, all of us, have weak areas and strong areas. No one is strong in every area. So let's look at me for an example. Some people can't resist alcohol, and they become alcoholics because the temptation is just too strong, and then I will never be an alcoholic. It has no power over me. Some people can't resist drugs, and they become addicts. I'm never going to be an addict. I have no interest in drugs whatsoever. I had an evangelism professor, I remember in seminary, Dr. Watson. It was actually Dr. Watson, not Sherlock Holmes buddy, but it was Dr. Watson. And he told us that if he ever found out that we went into a bar, he was going to fail us in the course. Because he didn't want us to expose ourselves to that environment. He didn't want to expose us to those people or to put us in a place where there was alcohol, where, he didn't want us there. So he was going to, he drew a line farther back and told us, don't go. And needless to say, me being me, I've sat in bars in this very city and told people about Jesus, and never once been overwhelmed by the power of alcohol. And I'm still not an alcoholic. I can walk right up to that line and not cross it. In Missouri, I preached to the homeless and the drug addicted and never became an addict. I can walk right up to that line and not cross it. Not everybody can. Some people need to keep a distance from those lines. They're weak in those areas. I have a weakness for books. If I go into a bookstore, I have no power over the pull of the tomes on those shelves. I can't. I can't resist them, especially the old dusty ones. I can't resist. A story, I was laying in bed the other night. This is just recently. I was laying in bed the other night, and I thought, I have to confess this to my wife. I have to. And I said, I did something. I bought myself something. And she said, what did you buy? I said, a book, a dictionary. I said, it's a reprint of the 1828 version of Webster's dictionary. She said, you bought a dictionary? I said, yes. I said, I'm so sorry. I said, I saw it and I had to have it. I said, I'm weak. And she looked at me and she said, you're a nerd. I was so excited when this came in the mail. I tell you, it was amazing. You need to know your strengths and you need to know your weaknesses. What tempts you and what doesn't. Know how far or how close you can walk up to that line. Is it alcohol for you? Is it drugs? Is it pornography? Sexual deviance, gambling, late night purchases on Amazon when no one's around? I'm talking about you. You need to occupy with power and fullness and freedom all of the area where you can live right up to the line. We talk about this. So many of us fail to live in the full power, the full joy, and the full vastness and expanse of their salvation. And you need to stay a safe distance from places where you're not strong enough, where you're weak. Think about the Christians around you. They may have to keep a distance from things that you can walk right up to. I know someone who is an alcoholic. They've attended AA for years, and he can't drink, can't be around it. It's just something that it just pulls him, and he's right in it. And I said, I don't have that problem whatsoever. I said, it's walk right past it. I said, it's not a problem. Yeah, and he said, yeah. He said, at our meetings, yeah, we talk about people like you. So, I'm sorry. But there's things that you can walk right up to the line on and things you can't. Paul says, don't destroy relationships over that. Stay with those people. Walk with them. They're your brothers and sisters in Christ, even if that means walking a distance from a line that you could otherwise walk right up to and touch. Paul specifically talks about food here. He talks about diet. The Jews and the Gentiles had different diets. They had different foods that they could and couldn't eat. Now, both are in the church, Jews and Gentiles. So who's right? And they're fighting over it in the church. They're fighting over, well, there's people who only eat vegetables, Paul, and there's people who like steak on the grill, and they're wrong and we're right. So Paul has to address this crazy issue. Remember, the church, the early church was mostly Jewish. Jesus was Jewish. The Jewish people, they didn't eat pork, they didn't eat shellfish, and all the guys were circumcised, okay? But now the majority of the church in Rome is made up of Gentiles, non-Jews. And they're eating barbecued pork ribs walking in the door with roasted clams, and they are absolutely not interested in circumcision. So what happens when salvation spreads, when truth spreads outside your circle? You need to decide what issues are non-negotiable and which ones are irrelevant to the truth of salvation. Relationships that are strong and flexible. Understand that Satan lies. We talk about this a lot. Satan deceives. Satan counterfeits. He counterfeits everything that God does. God created a system of animal sacrifice, a picture of bloodshed to cover our sin. All the way back to the Garden of Eden, when Adam and Eve sinned, and God uses the skin of animals to cover their sin, their nakedness. A system of priests at the temple sacrificing animals to atone for our sin. Satan creates his own temples. The pagan gods, during this time, all over Rome, all the Roman gods, they all have their own little temples and all these other things all around. So they have their pagan gods in these pagan temples with pagan priests sacrificing animals to pagan gods, just counterfeiting what God does. The priests at those cult temples would sacrifice animals, and then they'd sell them at Zeus's pagan butcher shop, home of the famous half-off ham steak, right? And the Gentiles love shopping there because prices are low and the meat is good. They have the best brat steaks and chops in town at Zeus's. Check it out. Then the Gentiles, who this is how they live, this is what they're doing, they come to Christ, they come into the church, they're saved, but now all the Jews in the church are yelling at them, stop eating satanic lamb chops. So who's right? The Bible tells us that man looks at the outward, but God sees the heart. God says, they both love me. They both love me. One side won't eat the pork chops, but the other side loves the pork chops. But they both love me. The pork chops are irrelevant. So stop fighting over food and just be friends already. This is just one issue that the church, that Christians struggle with among each other inside the church. What issues are primary and which ones are secondary? What issues are of most importance and what issues really are irrelevant to truth and salvation? Paul says, all I know is Christ and Him crucified. He's focused on that. He's like, you guys are fighting over bacon. What are you doing? Which issues are primary, which are secondary? Which ones are immutable in the eyes of God, and which ones did we just make up? Are we fighting each other over other things that don't matter to truth and salvation? Are we? We are. We do. And this is the heart of Romans chapter 14. Separating biblical truth from human opinion. So many people in the church, these self-satisfied, pious legalists, we'll talk more about this next week. You're excited to hear that. They take their opinions and try to turn them into concrete biblical truth. And they'll beat you with it. You know, we're going to talk about separating what is just opinion and what is actually truth. You know, the stuff that'll make your skin itch, the stuff that makes people upset, the stuff that I love to talk about. We're going to do that next time. We're going to look deeper into what issues in the church are truth and what issues are just opinions, because Paul wants unity in the church. That's what God wants. And he's writing in chapter 14 about how to get your head straight so that you can have unity instead of fighting amongst each other. We talked about the fact that the world is watching us. People outside those doors are looking at you. And they're saying, this person, they claim to be a Christian, and they follow Jesus, and they go to church. But then if they hear you in the supermarket stabbing somebody else from church in the back, or, gossiping this and that, oh, did you hear about so-and-so? I can't believe you did. They're like, well, they're no different than anybody else. They're no different. If I go there, it's going to be no different than here. And I talked about this last week. Some people, they don't come to church because their friends at the bar treat them better than the Christians they know. Shame on us. If we can't get this right in here, then don't go out there. You become a stumbling block for people coming to Christ. Don't then. The devil will distract us to keep us from the power of our salvation. He will distract us and he'll whisper in your ear, hey, that guy's a vegetarian. He's clearly not, he's less than you. He's a vegetarian. And you listen to it. We believe that garbage. And on 100 different issues. Churches split over the color of the carpet. No, they don't. Yeah, they do. You bet they do. Well, I wanted green drapes. They got blue drapes. Forget that. I'm out. I'm taking my tithe with me. Over curtains? You sacrificed the relationship with all your brothers and sisters in that church over the color of the drapes. Paul would call you a weak Christian, someone of weak faith. Well, I don't like the sound of that, Pastor Brad. Well, again, I want you to like me, but if you don't, I'm still okay with that. Because I'm going to love you anyway. Even if you are a Vikings fan. I don't know. I'll still love you. Throwing that out there. So, it's a short sermon. I'm going to wrap it up, actually. But there's a lot of issues in the church that people talk about, that people fight about, that split churches. We'll hit on a bunch of these next week. Things like water baptism, how that should be done. Should it be done infants or adults? Should we sprinkle or dunk? Church is split over this. It's real. There's all kinds of issues. In eschatology, in the book of Revelation, are you pre-trib, mid-trib, or post-trib, or no trib at all? And Paul's like, I'm focusing on Jesus and him crucified, and you're going to split over the church over something that obviously is unclear enough that you can have an argument over it. What are you doing? We need to stop being so easily manipulated by the enemy that all he has to do is, wiggle a worm and we bite. And we do. And he doesn't have to change his MO because it's been working since the garden. So, next week, it'll be fun. It'll be fun. We'll talk about all those things that you'll find out what I believe on these issues, and you probably won't agree with Pastor on that. Well, it's okay. I still love you anyway. We'll talk about them, and we'll hit on a bunch of those next week. So this is kind of a foundation piece, nothing spectacular. Give you a break after Gary's long sermon last week. No, I'm kidding. He's watching, so I have to do that. Next week, actually, I won't be preaching next week. Next week is Rebecca Stillwell is coming in to do a presentation on her ministry that she did in Nicaragua. So she's going to come in and talk about the ministry that she did there with PowerPoint, with slides, tell us some stories about her interaction with the Nicaraguan people and the church there in Nicaragua. And what I would like is to try to get some interaction, a lot of questions that we can ask back and forth, about what's the state of the church in places like that. What is it like there? What do they believe? What's it look like? What does the church there look like compared to the church here? What are they focused on in their ministry there? Because we are a very wealthy country, very casual, very fast food and internet place. And I think as a church, we focus on a lot of things that are irrelevant when we should be focusing on things that are primary instead of secondary. So we'll talk about a lot of that stuff next week. So with that, Lord, thank you. Thank you for picking Paul, for knocking him off his horse on that road that day and making him blind so that he could actually really see for the first time ever the truth. We love you, and help us to love each other in this room. In your name we pray, amen. All right. You are dismissed. God bless you. And 3, 2, 1, good night.